you before. I've got a pretty good story to tell, but it's not my night. But I'm a member on this High on Hope committee because I have experienced loving an alcoholic for 53 years of marriage. And I want to do my best to share with others that there's a way for hope and prayer to change the devastation to the addict and the addict's loved ones. It does not have to be a forever condition if we can all work together to institute a stopgap in the curse of that. So when I first joined this, my Bible verse was Exodus 34:7, which talks about the iniquity of the sins of the father upon the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So I went through a lot of things, as Gail told you, and I was always hoping that one of those generations would be the one to end it. But anyway, today my Bible verse is Psalm 40, and there's a lot of stories in between that Bible verse and this one, but the generation thing doesn't happen. It can be stopped. It can be stopped. And it doesn't have to happen to everyone. This can only be accomplished by receiving help from others and from God with prayers and hard work and dedication to making sure they remain clean and sober in order to become the stopgap to their children and the future generations. So that's my hope, and my good ending is that the Psalm 40 Bible verse is now part of my story, and it says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. So, one of us is not present tonight, who is Steve Mertz, but we all have stories, and we all want to help you. If any of our stories relate to anything you've been through, on your flyers you've got our email addresses, and we'd be glad to help in any way we can. Bob Gannon's actually going to be the speaker tonight, and so we're going to have a little break for a worship song. And I'm going to tell you a few things about Bob now before he comes up to speak after your song. He's been in healing programs at jails and prisoners for 40 years plus. He's been in Celebrate Recovery programs for 18 years plus. He's spoken at many conventions and all through the Southwest, really, and we even got to go to Nashville once. And he's written a book called Never Give Up. So he's done a lot of things in his life, which is long. We just had a great big 80th birthday party for him. And now he's writing a second book. So he's a good man to know. So you guys.
Wow. Now if I could just learn to sing. I'd like to, it seems like we have several authors here tonight. I'd like to introduce Lady Diane Brown has wrote a Christian book called Pickles Parables. And it's she takes a beagle hound that gets into trouble and corrects him through the gospel. It's one of the greatest children books I've read, and you will laugh. You know, it is funny. It's not only for children. It's a good gospel book. So, and it's on Amazon. But I wrote this talk. One of the reasons was I asked, talked to a lot of churches, and asked people why they're not evangelizing, and people say we don't know how. But we're continually reminded at our church service that we need to take the gospel of our faith and try to evangelize those in our communities. In my lifetime, there's never been a greater need to evangelize those who do not know Jesus or have fallen away from the church. I don't need to go through all the evils that plague our society today, especially young people. We have mission fields in our own communities and neighborhoods, which we need to take the gospel. We're told to be evangelists, but in many cases not shown how. It was a lot easier 30, 40, 50 years ago because most of our society grew up attending church, or at least had some type of religious experience. So how do we evangelize those who's never been exposed to Jesus? Many grew up in dysfunctional homes, having been abused physically, mentally, or sexually. Or homes or family never went to church. We are told that we need to tell them about Jesus, try to pray with them. But they may be angry at God for what they've gone through. They may not want to hear your message of how great our God is. You might try to explain the power of prayer and how prayer has a healing effect, not only on you, but maybe can change your whole family's life for the better. But you may hear. You may hear, I prayed for help when I was being raped, or beaten, or cold, or hungry, but he never showed up. I know in my case, this is how I felt when somebody tried to witness to me. I'd say to them, yeah, I guess you do love Jesus. You grew up in a nice home with a loving parents. You did well in school because you were smart. You went to college. You have a good job. But let me tell you how God guided my life. I grew up in an alcoholic and abusive home with a severe learning disability. Even being left-handed, the school tried to change me to write my right hand. And at times, the teachers would sit me back to the classroom with a dunce hat on my head, humiliating me. And I'd be made fun of by other students. In high school, I was placed in a special ed room called the dummy room by the rest of the students. I had to learn to fight to keep other students making fun of me. Tell me why I should love or trust God. As a result of these circumstances, I became angry at God at a very young age. And the anger grew from my adulthood experiences until I finally realized that God had given me a gift. After returning home from Vietnam, I was in emotionally horrible shape. I had now just come off the battlefield, and I had seen horrendous things. And I asked God many times on that battlefield, if you're real, why are you letting this happen? Why are you letting this happen? Many people had a really good heart and they wanted to help me. They felt sorry for me. But they had the Bible in their hand and they wanted to tell me about Jesus or whatever. But I didn't want to know about Jesus. I could have cared less about Jesus at this time in my life. After I was injured and medevaced off the battlefield, I was platoon sergeant, and I found out my platoon had been wiped out a few days after I was medevaced. And I became so angry on that day, I told God I will go to hell. I will go to hell before I will ever kneel or bow to a Jesus or God that didn't let me be with my men. And I was serious. You see, at this point, I didn't need anybody preaching the gospel to me. I needed a friend. I needed a friend who had a happy look on their face. I needed a friend who could look into their eyes and I could see the peace that they possessed, because that's what would begin to change me. I met a few Christians who were real Christians. They never told me about the Bible, but they told me about their lives and how they went to church. They didn't tell me you're going to hell if you don't read the Bible. They didn't tell me you're going to hell if you don't pray every day. They didn't tell me you're not religious enough or you don't believe in God enough. They didn't tell me any of that. But over time, I could see the peace they had in their family and the structure and love and I began to one part of it. I slowly began to investigate what they had in their life, and my life began to change. I began to seek God a little at a time. I'd get a little relief, and then I'd lose it, and I'd become angry again. And I'd turn back to my old life for a while. I was that angry person who had to hit bottom several times. It was kind of an uphill battle. I'd climb out of my hole for a while, and then back down in my hole for a time, and back out again. It took years before I totally climbed out of that hole. I then realized that God had given me many gifts. All the things that I had struggled with, dysfunctional home, the learning disability, the war, the low self-esteem, this was all gifts God had given me to evangelize those. For He needed me to work in the jails and prisons and the streets. For this reason, you need to know a little bit about a person's background before you start preaching Jesus to them. Amen. The only way you can bring this type of person to Jesus is when they see Jesus in you. Amen. What are the qualities of a good evangelist? Number 1, have humility and be meek. Right. Be a good listener. Number 2. Number 3, be forgiving and not judgmental. Amen. Number 4, be persistent and patient. Number 5, truly love God and all of His creation. Number 6, tell your story. Number 1, have humility and be meek. To be biblical humble is to have no concern for your own ego. Always try to elevate those around you. Humility is one of the most powerful attributes of our growth as a human. Being humble helps others build trust in us. It's a key point in being a good leader. When we are humble, it shines from us. A humble person has a unique quality that you can feel. It reeks from that person. It's someone you like being around. It's someone you trust. It's someone you want to be like. Believe in what they have to say. All these qualities add up to being a good leader. And then the Bible verse, the meek will inherit the earth. Does that make you wonder how the meek going to inherit the earth? But I don't think most people understand the meaning of meekness. Meekness is essentially an attitude and a quality of your heart. Thereby a person is willing to accept and submit without resistance to the will and desires of God. For the most part, meek people are quiet, gentle, and they always get along with others. But in reality, meek people are tough and dedicated to helping others. The meek are the heroes on the battlefields and in life. They're the ones who are willing to give their lives to save others' lives. The meek don't follow the crowd. They have the desire and the courage to do the right thing, even if it's unpopular. It's easy for the meek to accept the teaching of Jesus Christ because their heart is more like His. Meek people tend to attract people because of their gentle and honest nature. They are the ones who are the volunteers. What does this mean? Meek people are people of action. They are leaders, and they get things done. I want to relate a story of one of the meekest men I have ever met. I was in a prison ministry at Ozark. I need some water. Ozark Correctional Facility in Fooling, Missouri. And I got a call from a lady. All right.
An act of meekness?
Right in front of me. That's what happened when you turn 80. You need water.
Here's the red bottle.
I didn't need it at 79. I got a call from a lady. She said her 80-year-old dad. Now that's my age now. A few years ago, wanted to help me at the prison on Friday night at at a step study program at the prison. The only problem, he had a severe heart condition. And he knew his time was not long here on earth. But this is how he wanted to finish out his life. I met with him and his daughter, and I was shocked at his physical appearance. He was a short man, about 5'2" or so, pale, thin, and slightly stooped at his shoulders. And when he walked, he could not pick up his feet. He just shuffled at a slow pace, is all he could do. I was concerned about his health and how the inmates at the prison would accept somebody in his condition. But I agreed to let him be a part of the Celebrate Recovery program. And he rode with me out to prisons on Friday nights. We had to leave 15 minutes earlier because of the short walk from the prison's entrance of about 200 yards to the building where we were doing the step study. Many times he had to stop and rest because of his heart condition. As he walked, his arms would flail out back and forth as if to pull himself forward as he took each laborious step. But you could feel and see that fierce determination in his eyes. Nothing was going to stop him from getting to that step study. He was going to accomplish the mission that God had put in his heart, no matter how grueling or exhausting that short journey could be. I can only imagine the angels in heaven rejoicing as he watched his worn and fragile body struggling along those 200 yards to take the gospel to the men in that prison. I was surprised how the inmates immediately became attracted to him. They could see that poor health he was in, and because of that, they knew he truly cared about them. He became an instant hit with the inmates, and you could see and feel that special bond he had with them. He joined a newly formed step study group of 8 men. We always formed a step study group of 8 men because it's a very intense program and takes about 8 months to complete. Each man is given a step study book with questions, very intense questions about his past that has to be filled out and discussed each week. If anyone misses 4 or 5 meetings, they're dropped from the group. The group has to maintain that type of security, that what goes on in the group. The old man got his book and sat in his group each week, going through all the wrongs he had done in his past. All 8 men in his group completed the step study, and that was very rare. He was indeed a special person. He made the men in the prison feel, too, they were truly special. He gave them hope they could make it when they got out of prison. He was an example of a meek person. But in that sick and bent body exists a man of a great determination and a heart of a lion. He was a leader, and the men in the prison rallied around him because he gave him hope and courage that they could be able to achieve a better life when they got out of prison. The weather turned cold, and the doctor told him it was too dangerous for him to walk in the cold weather, that he could have a fatal heart attack while walking to the step study. Not being able to go to the prison broke his heart. And a short time later, he passed away. He was meek, not only tough and determined, but also a great spiritual leader. None of us who ever knew him will ever forget the lasting impression he made on us. Number 2, be a good listener. One of the rules we have in Celebrate Recovery is we never give advice unless it's something that happened to us or how we're trying to lead our life. This is because those seeking help are very sensitive and insecure to who they are. And your advice can hurt their feelings, or they may think you're putting them down. You don't know what's happened to that person and how it's affected their lives and their personal feelings. I know as a combat veteran, one of the reasons we don't tell our story is because people who have never been in war don't understand the trauma, what happens on a battlefield. People are well-meaning, but they say the wrong thing because they've never experienced war. They may say, you need to get over it. That was war. Wasn't your fault what happened. You need to read your Bible more, pray more. You need to get closer to God. Did you kill anybody? Just don't think about it. Like we want to think about what happened to us in war so we can live with the nightmares and flashbacks to survivor guilt and depression. These are mostly harmless statements, but to a veteran, they're offensive. They're offensive to somebody who's been in war. Statements like these can have devastating effects on someone who has suffered some kind of abuse or carries a lot of guilt to their past. I can tell you today, there are people here today that are dealing with some type of past or present trauma. Many have never told anybody about their tragedies or abuse they have gone through for fear somebody will criticize them or judge them. If they do talk to you about their struggles, just listen to what they have to say and let them know you care about them. They're telling you their story because they need somebody to talk to. Telling you what troubles them has a healing effect. The more we talk about the trauma that we struggle with, the more we disarm it. Number 3, be forgiving and non-judgmental. Working in recovery programs, you will meet people who tried to kick their addictions and failed. Maybe you spent a lot of time with that person trying to help them get on their feet, help them get a job, and so on. One day they quit coming to your program and do not answer your phone calls. I never call them more than 2 or 3 times. I don't go looking for them. You hear they're back in their old addictions, drugs, alcohol, or whatever they were hooked on. I never go looking for them because you must put their lives back in God's hands. Looking for them and finding them could put your life in danger. People on drugs are not the same person you met when they were clean and sober. You may get a call from them with a wild story, and I have got many. They need money. Don't meet with them or send them money. They'll be used to buy drugs. I've heard wild stories like my kids are starving. I got a great job in another state. I need money to get there. I need medication for myself and my family. My sister's been kidnapped. Well, I'll never forget that one. Needed $400 to get her back. I told them I'm calling the FBI, and they said, oh, my God, don't do that. The list goes on. I always tell people it's a heartbreak ministry, and you will experience more failures than success. But you need to familiar yourself where people can go for help. When they call you for help, tell them where they can go get help. If you're going to be in these ministries, you need to familiar yourself with all the avenues that you can help people. Amen. If they return to your program, welcome them as a prodigal son was welcomed in the Bible. Never ask them where they've been or what they've done. Just act like they never left. Never be judgmental. Through the years, I've seen men relapse 2 or 3 times, and I am one, before they beat their addictions. It's so important that we maintain our spiritual life, going to church every Sunday, having a prayer life, and possessing a demeanor of forgiveness and love. Theodore Roosevelt had a saying, which I like, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I also like the saying from St. Francis, a Catholic saint. He says, preach the gospel all times. Use words when necessary. Daniel 12:3. And those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the sky above. And those who turn others to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever. Even though they have turned to their addictions and their life has returned to the day-and-day misery, your light will shine brightly in their memory. They will remember the peace and tranquility they felt being around you. And that may would draw them back to your program. Never give up, and never stop praying for them. Number 4, persistence and patience. We must accept people where they are in life and show them love and kindness. You see, people are attracted to holiness. They can feel the godly spirit in you because it's kind and gentle. Holiness is not a virtue to show your fellow brother. It's a state of your soul. They want to be around you, talk to you. In time, they'll want that peace and tranquility in their lives that they feel that you have in yours. If you ask those in prison what they want most in life, they'll tell you peace. Matthew 5:15 and 16. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Like I said before, Christians often think they can say a magic word or a magic verse and tell somebody about Jesus, and they can convert someone. But many people in this world have been hurt deeply, sexually or physically abused, and that hurt is deep. Sometimes it takes years of working with a person before you can bring them out of the hole they live in. Truly love God and all of His children. You see, God don't ask us to love one another. In John 15:12, my commandment is, love each other as I have loved you. You see, we're all made in God's image, and we have God's Spirit in us. If you hate someone, you're hating one of God's creations. You're hating someone that God made in His own image, and you're hating the Spirit that God put in that person. That's why we must learn to love all of our brothers and sisters unconditionally, regardless of race or afflictions that they may have caused. This is a story about a person who came out of a sexually abused home. Her name was Rachel. 2 uncles had sexually abused Rachel from the age 3 to 13 years of age. 2 women in the household knew what was going on. And when Rachel would try to tell them, they called their names. And one started with a W and more. From a child to the age 13, she lived in a hopeless situation. At 13 years old, a family member came into her room while she was trying to fight off one of her uncles as he was trying to rape her. And she was removed from that abusive situation. But Rachel was deeply wounded, and she spent time in jail and drugs. It was a long 2 or 3 years working with Rachel. She never had any confidence that anyone decent would ever love her. I knew what Rachel saw in me was a perfect gentleman, and I tell you, that was a hard standard for me to maintain. I knew I had to live up to that image that Rachel projected of me. If I failed, she may return to her old life. When we met, we always met at a recovery program meeting or some public place. I had to always be careful how I projected my Christian image. I never told a bad joke. I never made a sexual reference. I made a habit of talking about my own struggles and the battles that I fought every day. In one of her testimonies, she says that most men who became friendly with her always wanted something from her. I was the first man who never wanted anything from her, and you can probably guess what that is. As I said, I always built up my marriage. Rachel wound up going to prison with me and helped me find housing for some of the men in our step-study program. At the prison, she met a prison guard, and I tried to warn her not to marry this guy. There was something about him wasn't right, but she married him anyhow. And he not only became a sex offender, but a rapist. And he raped at least 5 or more women. I'm not sure before they caught him. And his picture was all over the papers in that city. Rachel was humiliated and embarrassed. And I remember her calling me, and she was just bawling her eyes out as I listened to her. And I said, Rachel, we'll get through this together. You have to stay positive. I was worried she'd get back on drugs. I called her every day and told her what a good person she was and how much progress she made. and how much I cared about her. And our fellow people in our recovery program cared about her. Rachel also had a learning disability and not had graduated from high school. Rachel went on and got her GED, and she went on to college. She got a bachelor's degree in counseling. She led 6 women's step studies. That's a year apiece. She started her own open door ministry for women who have been sexually abused and who cut themselves. Today she works also in the Boys Baptist Home as a counselor in Mount Vernon, Missouri. Rachel's story is a great story, but it wasn't an easy one. It took years. One thing Rachel always told me later when she got her degree, she said, "Bob, you never put me down. Every time I called you with a problem, you never said I told you so, or I knew you shouldn't go down that path." She said, "You always found some way to make it positive, so I didn't feel like a loser. You always gave me hope there'd be tomorrow." And that's what we have to do as evangelists. We have to give them hope that there will be a tomorrow. I never lied to her. I never told her it was not going to be a tough fight, just like the fight that I was in. And I still struggle every day to be the Christian that God wants me to be. Like Rachel and myself, we all say if we come back, we want to come back the same road, because that's who we are today. Our life is not about the material world. It's about helping people and serving people. It's about reaching out because of all that we have suffered. We have developed a heart and compassion for others. And we know how it feels to be unwanted, unloved. And we know how it feels that you're not worth anything. Number 6, tell your story. To be a good evangelist, you have to tell your story. You must tell people your own struggles, and we all struggle. It could be gossip, anger, hate, gambling, pornography. So tell your story. If you want to be an effective evangelist, if you say you're not struggling and don't have any addictions, know that most everyone in this room has some kind of addiction. We must be careful about the words we use. Saying the wrong words if somebody is seeking help for their addiction can hurt their feelings and drive them away. I think it's sad that there are people here today who have been abused sexually or mentally or some other types of abuse which carry a deep hurt. Most people have endured this type of pain and physical emotion. Struggle with low self-worth. They feel inferior to others. They feel ashamed to discuss their abuse that they have endured. Many of our churches don't teach members how to help and love those people and make them not feel ashamed of something that they may have suffered. That's not their fault. I always tell people I meet in recovery, you need to find a church and attend a good church. Many have told me I did attend a church, but they all seemed so perfect. No one had any problems. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt out of place. And of course this is totally wrong, because we're all tempted by the devil and we all have problems in our life. At one time or another, we've all gone down the road and made mistakes. The most powerful way to evangelize somebody, tell your story. Tell your story how you struggle with temptation, such as materialism, gambling, gossip, drugs, food, sexual addiction, alcohol. No matter what it is, we all have addictions to something. By telling your story, you will make them feel like they're not the only ones who struggle. You'll make them feel that they have some of the same struggles that you have. I always tell everyone we're made in the image of God, and we have a very spiritual body. If you inject evil into that body, you'll have turmoil, depression, and low self-worth, because evil cannot live in a spiritual body without turmoil. Telling your story, we're actually disarming that turmoil or sin. It's almost like confession. Now we have taken some of the worst incidents in our lives, from stealing, pornography, or whatever, and we have changed it to a powerful weapon to serve God and bring others into His kingdom. The valuable outcome of telling your story, it gives us courage and deepens our own faith. It begins to extract all this guilt and shame we have, which has blocked out much of our spirituality. You see, God weeps for all of His children. He weeps when he sees the drug addict, the bag lady, the prisoner or convict. He sees us all as brothers and sisters who need to love each other and to help each other go through our trials and struggles. He wants all of his children to enjoy his kingdom. We're not here just to enjoy life. We're here as missionaries. And that's what we will answer for when we die. What kind of mission did you have on earth? There's no greater way to evangelize people than to tell your story. Be honest. Make them feel comfortable to tell their story. To make them feel that you're not so self-righteous that you've never done anything wrong. Perhaps you could put some thought into this and pray for God's help in coming across a ministry you'd like to be involved in. There are many ways to help. Food pantries, church functions. You can even create your own ministry. Something as simple as visiting neighbors or in rest homes, reading newspapers or books to them. Maybe even be able to start a shared Bible study. You could be unique like this one lady I know in Joplin. Her name is Ada. She bakes bread and gives it away to many people as a kindness and sharing her Christian faith and love for others. When our time on earth is up, what memories you want to leave your family and friends? You'll not be remembered by the material things you own, but you will be remembered by the kindness or mercy you showed others, or you will be remembered by the lack of it. The Bible tells us not to store up treasures on earth, but to help and love one another, thereby creating treasures in heaven. The only thing we own is our soul. And it's going to carry our story of our time on earth. And that's the story we'll be judged by. Don't let your story be a story of selfish greed, the material world, or not caring about your fellow man. On Judgment Day, our soul is going to stand before Jesus, either in incredible glory or dreadful shame. It's your choice. Thank you.